Good morning, everyone. Microphone check, screen check. Looks like everything's working correctly on all fronts here. Fantastic. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hopefully everyone has been able to rest up, get ready for the day, all that fun stuff. Before we jump in, as always, on the right side of the screen, make sure to read through the Live Trader Morning Prep PDF. Very important to go through and understand everything that is inside there. Just a quick note before we jump on in as well on the YouTube side of things. The broadcast does have between, like a 5 and 30 second delay depending on where you're logging in from, which will definitely impact the timeliness of what I may be talking about at any given moment. Also, just wanted to take a second to give a shout out to the latest members that joined overnight, this morning, etc. Thank you so much for the support. I'm pumped to have you on the SSFTG family. If you aren't a member yet, you do have a few different options to check out if you're looking to further your trading education and career. First off, here on YouTube, you can check out the join button below the stream. The YouTube family gains access to the extended hours trading room, which continues the morning room from 10 until whenever things slow down, sometimes 10:30, 11 o'clock. Every member gains permanent access to the Discord chat server, and of course, you get the awesome badge next to your name here on YouTube to show your support. It just looks really cool. To understand the trading approach and what we're doing here every day in the room, look no further than the Day Trading Academy. Listen, this isn't going to be a small PDF that you're going to finish in an afternoon, all right? This is something you're going to really have to tuck in and sit down for, because you got 19 plus hours of course and study material, including homework, reviews, study guides, all kinds of stuff. So make sure that you're ready for that if you're going to be digging in on that side of things. And then, of course, finally, the big kahuna, the Mac Daddy, the VIP. VIPs have exclusive permanent access to the non-delayed stream, and that covers the entire morning session from 9 to 11 with no delay. And that way you can ensure that you're on the fastest connection possible so that you don't miss a beat. Alongside that, VIPs also have access to our monthly webinars, which we just had one this past weekend. We've got our next one scheduled already. Make sure to check that out if you're a VIP. Don't miss that. Not sure what the topic is. We still have a month to figure that out, but if you've got any suggestions, feel free to throw those in. Private events, one-on-one scheduling, all kinds of cool stuff. So the list goes on and on and on. Whether you're here for the very first time or you're a seasoned VIP veteran, just welcome. I'm glad to have you trading alongside with me today, analyzing these crazy, sheesh, what an understatement today, these crazy markets of ours. Let's take a look at some news, take a look at some charts, see what's going on for today so we can kind of better prepare ourselves for what's ahead. Don't forget to grab your morning DP levels. I'm a bit late to the party. You can see I forgot to bold some of them. It's getting a little bit of a late jump with everything going on here. I'm going to have to update these on my charts in a second as well. As far as the news calendar is concerned, we did have some relatively larger news. Oops, got to get my drawing thing going. There we go. We did have some larger news this morning with the non-farm payrolls. They came out way, way higher, 850 versus 700. The revised was 583. Jeez, pretty big jumps up in these numbers here. We also did have the unemployment rate, which came out worse than expected, 5.9% versus the forecasted 5.7. So you've got a little bit of a positive negative going on. Obviously, the market is seeing it as pretty positive. As we go into the rest of the day, there isn't anything else. We've got CFTC, speculative net position stuff, Baker Hughes rig count stuff, all the normal. Nothing really to worry about. 10 o'clock does have factory orders, but it's a medium number, and it's non-farm, so, I mean, who really cares about the factory orders when they've already got non-farms? Maybe it moves a little bit. We'll see. Let me grab these levels here, and we'll just do it one by one. Update my DP levels. All right, there we go. So as far as the NASDAQ is concerned, looking at how we've got the continued momentum to the upside, it is absolutely bonkers, isn't it? I mean, geez, it looked like they were trying to really get a trappy top in there and get this thing to rotate back down. And if we look at the volume from the bottom all the way up to the top at that point, once it loads, there we go, we can see that we have that POC shift, and the sellers were trying. And it's not like they made it a shy attempt either. They bounced off of that aggressively once again and held it down for the majority of, well, the overnight into this morning. So the fact that they were trying so hard in this area to push the market down, and now we failed again, look where the market rotated back up above. They never came back to that POC. Now we have to modify this just a bit further forward to see where it's at, just to see if it changed. Let's see here. All right. And that's a big clue right there. That miss. There are a lot of shorts who are stuck. That's really, really important information right now. And the fact that they have not been able to get out at break even or better, it's been nothing but negative for them once they rotated above that top. And you can see how aggressively they did it. So with that kind of context, this has a chance to possibly, and I hate to say it, man, it has a chance to possibly squeeze again. Like, we have another shot at a runaway bull market. Again, no pullbacks, just straight to the ceiling. Unbelievable how this thing's moving. If this is the case, and we're looking for larger moves here, going out to the 60-minute chart to kind of gauge what's going on, we've got to see a larger transition. I'm going to pop this over to minute before it gives me a year and a half to load. Go all the way down to the bottom, and we can see that the POC is still back here. Now, this is where we kind of gain that concern of what I'm talking about up here. The same thing happened here. They broke above it and never allowed them to get out. And this is the kind of rally that follows after that kind of thing. Now, put that into context, right? This is a low at 13,700 to a high of 14,700, basically. It's about a 1,000-point move. If we see another one of those, then we're talking NASDAQ in almost 16,000s. Okay? Like, let that sink in for a second. The implications that this has is nuts if this starts breaking up again. Now, the big thing here on the longer term is that we have not seen the POC shift or anything like that up here. So from this perspective, we're not talking 16K yet. It is still possible, but this is still more likely going to get sucked back down to that 13,700 to get all of those traders out at some point. Maybe, unless we start seeing that POC shift and failure. We are getting that on the shorter term, and that's why it's such a concern for, well, more of a concern for the shorts, I guess. But if we go back to the more recent low, up to the highs, it's the same thing that just happened on that bigger picture. Now we've got it here as well. They missed it again. Ooh, lordy, we've got some potential. That could cause a really nasty spillback today too. Got to be mindful of both sides here. Over on the S&P, let me grab my updated level here. 309.50, 290.60. There we go. Looking at the S&P, this is another one of those situations where they had that breakout above the POC. Now the S&P did have the pullback to allow those traders out, right? They very obviously got that. Even up here, that was that big pullback that happened over here. Once this thing loads. There we go. That was the pullback that happened right there. You can see the responses that happen when they're allowed to get out at break even. They don't make it a shy, non-obvious thing. It's very obvious. When they want to get out, they jump ship, and you see this type of response back to the upside. So the S&P's got a little bit of an excuse. They allowed the sellers to get out. We transitioned the POC back up, but they're not necessarily stuck. That does still allow for some pretty strong upward objectives, but instead of, a 2,000 rally, 2,000-point rally like on the NASDAQ, on the S&P, it's looking like the potential to go maybe another 100 points to the upside in the bigger picture. Something to consider so long as we stay above this POC. Looking really good, though. Over on gold, gold is finding those buyers off of the lows and kicking the market back up above this POC. This is the break point. This is what all of the sellers who are looking for that rotation down, they did not want to see this. Before I get lost in it, let me get my DPs on here real quick. Whoops. So the way that we've got gold kind of transitioning is with that POC to the downside. Obviously, there's been an undertow on the lows. There's been a lot of things saying that the market should want to try to correct, but we haven't seen that proof until this break right now. So that means that this is still potentially very early to the party if it's going to be a big reversal back to the upside. It's still super early to say it's going to be a big reversal. We haven't broken any major confirmed swings, but they're definitely challenging that zone. So if they can get a little bit further up, I know it's going to feel like buying the top, but that's a lot of what the bulls need here before that transition back. I would still be looking for a pullback to buy into. I don't want to buy the highs, but if this thing just starts running away, look at what's behind it. There's nothing to stop it. So we haven't gotten through that window yet, but if we start sticking our leg in there and this starts running up, we might not necessarily need to expect a pullback because there might not be one. And if there is, it's likely going to be shallow before another really strong correction. The market does not like hanging out in this area for very long. So keep that in mind. If gold starts rallying back up and you're waiting for a pullback and it's starting to get up into the 1810s, you might want to either hit the gas pedal or just assume you got missed. Looking over on crude oil here, let me update this one. That's going to be at 75.20. There we go. So looking at crude oil, I mean, aside of the fact that this thing has just been nonstop to the upside, one of the big things that we really have to keep an eye on is the same that we've been talking about in a lot of these. Is there a POC shift? Are sellers attempting to take control? Is anything happening in the bigger spectrum that may be causing this some trouble? And if we look at, geez, OP, this looks like the NASDAQ now. With this rally to the upside, I'm just throwing it out there. You know, not too long ago, crude oil was trading at negative 40. Just saying, you know. Anyway, facetiousness out of the way, we've got this giant rally to the upside. I want to see what's going on from this perspective. Are we having any POC shifts? Are they trapping? Are they being allowed out? What's happening on this move up? Let me make this, instead of tick, let's go to minutes so it loads a bit faster. And let's go back to, first off, the most obvious pullback. Man, none of these are really that great, huh? Before that breakout, we had the POC down here at 65.77. We creep a little further forward and we go to the next high and we see a POC shift down at this low. Now, the key to remember here is that that POC didn't shift until it broke above a new top. So I know in hindsight, it was like, oh man, obviously buy this, right? You'd be nuts not to. It didn't actually happen there, okay? Now, it might have happened a little bit around that area, but it wasn't confirmed until we start breaking above this top. So, you know, hindsight, you got to remember, be concise in the way that you're going to analyze this. This isn't a confirmed POC until we break back above those tops. Once they break above that top, notice where they rifle back to. That's why it's important to know the difference between a confirmed one, because you get those immediate responses, and the non-confirmed ones that look like they're going to go and then rip your face off. That will definitely happen too. 2 seconds. All right, back. Sorry about that. So this bullish movement to the upside, it's important to kind of dissect how this momentum up happened. Like, who's it messing with, right? So this little pullback right here gives us a lot of context. Look at the responsiveness. I mean, almost to the tick on a snap pullback that probably nobody was able to respond to, except the people who had their limit orders there to get out at break even. And man, they did. They bounced out of that area fast. So with that kind of responsiveness, I have a hard time saying that the sellers are super stuck, at least at this point in time. As we go a little bit further up, we can see that that POC is still there. We know that that's where they exited. Let's see if there's any new shifts in POC. Are there any new participants to the party? And there's the new participants. We've got new selling action going on with a POC shift back to the upside. Because remember, that last story is kind of done, right? They're sort of out of the way. It's not that it's invalid, and if we come back to this area, we'll probably find support there too. But it's a little less important, if you catch what I'm trying to say here. So this area is going to be kind of the zone where the market might try to push down and stall, but there's not necessarily anything that can stop the market until we start reaching out to that last area, and that's going to be back down here in the 66s. So we haven't seen that POC shift in the sense where they've been successful. They tried getting down lower here, and those sellers may be stuck. So as they break above, is there any responsiveness to that? Are those sellers getting out? Are they exiting, etc.? And that's where we can zoom in and see. Well, until it's confirmed, really, we haven't had a pullback, but we do see responsiveness off of this area. So there are early indications that there are some sellers, if they were sellers, that exited at break even if they gave it a shot. Now, after the break above the highs, that's the confirmation that we need, so it would be nice to see it pull back once more, which means that that's an open area back there at 73.27 or so. Nice little zone of support that could bounce the market back up. The other concern that I have is that if we stay up here for too long, we'll shift another POC up, and that will be the seller's attempt to drive it down a little bit further back into challenge, maybe even down to the 70s. Get that nice swing low down there. That'd be really nice. Either way, very top heavy, but still reasons to buy. Over on the euro, let me get this all updated here. There we go. So as far as the euro is concerned, we obviously just a second ago saw the POC that's still up at the top. Let me make sure that nothing's changed. Creep it forward just a second here. Still no POC change. So the POC for the euro is still up at 22,135. We haven't seen the buyers step up to the plate yet. If they are, they haven't done enough to shift the POC, suggesting that they're still underwater. The longs are, at least. The sellers are doing just fine on this down move. Obviously, we do have some short-term concerns here with this little poke underneath the lows. We've got to check out the volume there and see what happened. All right, this is kind of the do or die. We're back to the POC. If the buyers were trying to bottom weight this average, they slipped underneath it. We know the drill, right? We see this happen on the NASDAQ like 7 million times a day. The buyers get in, traps them all out, and then jukes back up. The response here could very well not have any pullbacks. This could just be one big string of bull bars all the way back up. Something to consider. Right, I mean, there is a definitive chance that this goes nuts to the upside on the euro. And noting that that POC is way up there, that could be a huge magnet to kind of suck it up to that high. And if we look backward, we've got an open window to help it out. There's nothing to stop it in here. So, I mean, if it starts really rallying up to the highs here, this thing could go nuts. Very interesting to see what happens here on the euro. There's a lot of potential. And a lot of buyers know that. They're going to be buying down here, trying to get as low a risk as possible. Unfortunately for them, hedge funds also know that, and they're going to try to challenge those stops and fill the coffers, etc. It might get gross down here if it doesn't rocket. Speaking of gross, Bitcoin hovering around the lows here, not really doing anything. 33,000 acting as a lot of support. We still haven't really reached out to that double value perspective yet, or the larger pullback. This, I mean, from the pullback side of things, in terms of like an ABCD correction, we've got A to B to D. I mean, it's a literal 1-to-1 move. It's an literally perfect ABCD move down. So, I mean, does it have to reach out to grab value? From a structure perspective, it doesn't. I mean, buyers have a really solid reason to want to get back to the upside here. We just need to see this shift. We've got to get back above this falling resistance at the very least. We've got some potential wedging going on down here. I mean, they've still got a lot of work cut out for them. But it's looking good. You know, it's looking like they've got a shot. Ethereum, they did have that big rally to the upside. You know, here again, is this going to be an ABCD correction? Ethereum hasn't reached out for that. You don't even need to draw the tool on there. It's very obvious. It's going to be hovering down in the 1900s to 1950s. So, I mean, there is still room for definitive pullback. And if we're looking backward here, we do know that Ethereum broke that high, and that's what the buyers needed. This whole move down is BTFD. It doesn't really matter where it is. Buyers will be buying into it. But it is nice to try to at least get close to the bottom, right? So from that kind of perspective, I mean, at the very least, might have a third press. A little bit lower, sub 2000s. Be nice to see a quick little washout. Either way, it's looking pretty good. Just got to see him show up to the party. Taking a look over on the NASDAQ and looking at the bigger picture here. Let me get... Those are all good now, so I can close that out of the way. And I can drop that out of the way. There we go. 10 minutes until the open. As far as the NASDAQ is concerned, looking on the, I mean, the daily, this is what we were talking about and have been talking about for a while. Yesterday is the first break of the previous candle's low. The question is, are buyers going to take it? And, well, the response was closing above it by the end of the day. That made it pretty obvious, right? Now, the unfortunate thing about that is that, once again, everything happened at like 3 in the morning. The Euro session had all the fun, and the US session is coming in to pick up the scraps while it's back at all-time highs again. That probably means that the US session is going to be a little bit more range-bound. I hope not. I hope this thing keeps screaming up to the highs. I mean, it's not like it hasn't done it before, but it would make sense to see it go a bit more sideways, unfortunately, especially assuming that we're above major target areas. Now, being at all-time highs, who knows, right? All-time highs are that 50-50 shot in the dark. So do I want to try to pick a top on the NASDAQ? Absolutely not. That would be ridiculous, especially considering that we haven't had a POC shift. We haven't had anything telling us that that should happen. Why would we look for something along those lines? Now, let me move this back to minutes so it's not going to take forever. Well, I mean, I tried. I really tried, but decided that it was going to take forever anyway. Come on. There we go. So here again, as far as that POC shift to the upside, the buyers, they missed it. This is that same visual just on the daily perspective. We've got that really strong rally to the upside. If we continue this drawing forward and kind of see, this is where we got to see, is the POC shifting up? Are the sellers taking control? Are they pushing it down? Well, the POC is still back here, but man, it's obvious that we've got some volume cranking in up at these tops. Now, one thing is for sure. We do not have the POC shift to the upside. So from the daily perspective, the shorts, if they are stuck short, they're still stuck. They have not done enough work to bring their average up far enough to be able to get this to slide lower into profitable territory. So they're still getting squeezed. We are seeing accumulation volume stepping up into these highs after a little bit of deceleration. That makes sense. Profit taking on up into the highs. We're seeing the sellers attempting to build positions. We have not seen the POC shift back to the upside, and that's where the important bit of information comes in. So yesterday's break underneath the lows and that weak close, well, they took it right back up to the sky once again, all the way back up. So if we look at it from a 15-minute perspective, I mean, obviously a lot happened in that 15-minute span. Jeez, oh Pete. But, the overall movement that we've got going on here, we can now confirm that this little bitty thing right here was a pullback. And, well, given the pullback, the impulse POC would have been right back in the middle. Those traders have not been allowed out either. We've got a lot of sellers on basically every time frame that's stuck. And that could be the explanation as to why it's squeezing so aggressively. My concern with that aggressive squeeze is fairly obvious, though. If we're breaking that aggressively to the upside, is this exhaustion? And, well, I mean, from the initial move, it's already up 1.2 times as much. So that's a very strong move to the upside that, maybe this does want to keep going. It is possible. But are we reaching the top? We're a little too, we're too late. The Euro session had all the fun. That's the problem. I don't want to be a buyer way up here. And that means that we've got to buy a pullback. And when the pullback happens, then we have to ask ourselves, is this the pullback? That's the possible reversal. And things just get really, really shady really quick. The Asian session to Euro session transition, there was essentially no Asian session whatsoever. The Euro session dominated the entire thing again. It feels like we've seen that before. I don't know. Have we seen that before? Non-existent Asian session? Massive Euro session? Non-existent Asian session? Oh, man, it's weird. It's like we've seen that before. This kind of movement isn't like it's a surprise. Now, the one thing that we do see out of a lot of those is that it reverses. We see that big jump in the Euro session, and we get that drive back to the downside. And again, that's further increasing my concerns here. It doesn't give me the warm fuzzies, but if we go down to the bottom, we'll see. How are they at least playing by the rules? Man, they're not. They've got an L2, continuation break above the highs. Now it's an L1, then it's an L1. These either have to stick to L1s or we're going to get an L3, which, again, further confirms a deeper pullback. There's too many problems here. That's really the issue. Yeah, and then stack on top of that, that's a great point to put out there too. Stack on top of that the fact that it's Friday, right? It is a new month, but on top of that, we're going into a holiday weekend. We've got 4th of July coming up, right? My daughter's birthday's on Monday. I'm not going to be here on Monday. The room's going to be closed for all of that. So there's going to be a lot of people who aren't. I mean, I have an excuse. It's my daughter's birthday, right? But a lot of people are. They don't need an excuse. It's like it's the Monday after 4th of July. Screw you. I'm not coming into work. You kidding me? A lot of people have had these vacation days in forever. So with that mindset, I mean, really, today's going to be a funky one. You know, we're going to get those herky jerk moves that come. They feel like they're going to come out of nowhere because there's just no volume to stop them from happening. That means that we've got to be careful. We've got to be very careful. Got the open in 4 minutes. Right around the corner here. Give me a second here. I'm going to grab a drink. All right. Finally getting a little bit of a pullback ahead of the open. Remember, the next big time slot is going to be 9:28, but I mean, the way this thing's moving is absolutely bonkers. A pullback, it's either it has to hold an L1 or we're going to get a significantly deeper pullback more often than not. At least that's what probability would dictate. We know how the NASDAQ can be when, when it's off to the races. Very nice two-legged correction down for the bulls if they were looking to buy that this L1. I mean, it's fits. You're drinking double shot of Jack Daniels, I know, right? Today would be the day, huh? Getting a little bit more pullback into the L1. Again, this, if the bulls are going to hold it, this is where they have to hold it in. If we're looking backward a little bit from the previous pullback from top to bottom is kind of the same problem. Their POC isn't really until the bottom of L1. If we drag this further forward before the breakout, the modified POC is towards the top. Man, talk about polarized POCs. It's either got to hold the top or the bottom, which means that traders are going to be super opposites in how they trade this. They'll look to buy here with a stop right around the halfway point because they know if it gets here, it's probably going to go here. Then they'd rather buy here and then risk down to the next one. And if it gets there, it's going to be very polarized all the way down. Now, if it starts breaking through there, then L3 would be likely next. We'll see. 928 hits. This thing is absolutely ridiculous to the upside. Kind of curious, just out of... I know this isn't technically that all-time high, but just for the modified POC, where did they land it? Right about 60s? Yeah, 550. Yikes. All right. Got 1 minute until the open. Hope you got your running shoes on. Or a safety net. One of the two. Today could be absolutely crazy. The S&P at the moment, along with basically everything else, is looking at a massive outside gap up. 43.22 quarter. Previous close was all the way down at 43.0950. Miles away. And here it sits. Come on now. If we can get a flash dip into the open down into the 1750s or so, it wouldn't necessarily hurt my feelings. Like 18s, well, really like the 20s to 15s is kind of the hot spot down there for buyers trying to buy that that little lower portion. You can see all those wicks. And they pinged right off of that. Now, what's interesting is we haven't seen a POC shift, but we are bouncing directly off of the top of that L1, and that's where, again, it either had to work or they're not going to hold it. That's a pretty good bounce. I mean, what'd they take, like 2 ticks of risk? From an actual risk standpoint, that thing jumped, that was like a 10 to 1. If these bulls fail, we'll start seeing it close underneath the L1 level and likely start seeing some resistance coming in as those buyers start exiting at break even if they didn't take anything off. Okay. It's getting a little gross down here, but we're back to retest that area where earlier buyers would have come in. Now they're breaking above it. That's good. Very aggressive bullish momentum. Possible candle gapping on the last few 500 tick candles. Very strong bullishness right back up to the POC. Now, they haven't shifted the POC, so this zone will be kind of interesting in terms of how they hold it. This rejection off of it, that could just be a trap to get sellers in, especially with this amount of support coming in. I'm going to look for a continuation back to the upside. Give me that dip. There we go. We've got the potential dip below that previous bull bar. This is the pullback zone that buyers are going to be looking for to pick it up. If they retest L1, that's going to be even more interesting. We've got a lower high, and the market's holding underneath the POC. But again, we know L1 is the aggressors. Nice little dip further down there. Back to retest the L1. Very nice. Drag it a little further forward so it's easier to see. I'll reduce a little bit while we climb back up underneath the POC and try to trail out this final one to allow it to keep going. If it doesn't want to keep going, though, then it'll be a little bit more difficult, but we still haven't shifted the POC. Like, come on. Beautifully weak bear bar. Come on now. Get through the POC. The last time you guys failed, so let's hit the gas pedal. Big jump back. Could be just a quick washout, honestly. The way that that's setting up feels like a washout. They did reject that break-even point. POC shifting down. Ooh. Okay. We're finally shifting the POC down. POC still jumping around a little bit. Whew, man, we got a lot of volatility in this thing. Holy crap. Retesting break even. Likely taking out a lot of stops. Good old break even traps. Let's see if they want to get back up. We're back in that POC. We took out a bunch of break even stops. Let's see if they want to get some FOMO and chase this thing back to the upside. Yeah, there it is. Come on, FOMO. Let's go. Everybody just got tapped out at break even. Now they're feeling left out. Look at them all come in. Keep on going. Little trap underneath the last bull bar, maybe. We're back above the POC. Yep. Bulls still jumping in. Get that FOMO. Keep on going, bulls. We got the highs to hit now. Yeah. Beautiful target right there. Oh, right after I got out. All right. I took it ahead of the highs because that was where the last rejection was. But man, what a beautiful rip. Fantastic. That break-even trap, it was really hard to not add on that little dip underneath the previous bull bar, I gotta say. But, man, beauty. Right on back up to the highs. Again, they're holding the L1s with more continuation. Chase, 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 chase. Big old first leg that jumped up here on this rally. That pullback jumped higher, nice little pullback, but they dipped underneath that. So that doesn't... is this really a pullback, or is it just kind of a continuity pullback? I mean, realistically, this could be one giant completionary leg to the upside. I still have a really hard time wanting to stay long as they complete into the highs. But there's some definitive reasons to buy the dip, at least. See if they can get more continuation back up. Bulls are starting to really rip away at this area. That previous POC, we can go back now, as it is confirmed. Really? Come on. The heck? I've never seen one of those take that long to load on a POC, or a tick chart. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have deleted it. This is how those data glitches happen, isn't it? Gotcha. What about if I put it over here? What the heck? Okay. All right, that's weird. My POC was working, and now it's not. Conspiracy theories, I tell you. See if we can get a little bit more of a pullback here. The last time was the L1. They were successful in holding that L1. So if we get this to go back up, the next L1 is going to be down in the 36s. We do have the first 5-minute bar. I was so distracted, I didn't even have a chance to load the first 5-minute bar up. It barely even looks like a first 5-minute bar. Okay. 22... Or 32. I can't... Make sure it's in the right spot. 32.50 is the 5-minute POC. Which is right back in an L1. Man, perfect. It's hard to ask for something better than that, huh? There is a nice little level of support down here in the 48s, 46s, 47s, this little corrective phasing that's going on here. It would be nice to see back in, like, preferably even the 47s. It's definitely on the higher low scenario, like not even pulling back to L1, because that's the type of trend that this is sort of setting up to be right now. A breakaway trend that just doesn't stop. Bulls starting to creep back in. I'm going to look for a quick long for a scalp near the highs, but I'm not going to add a lot of risk on this because if it wants to pull back, this is where it's going to pull back from. Nice little trap underneath the lows. Can they get that bear dip underneath there? There we go. Nice little flash down a little bit lower. I'm looking at this market becoming a non-pullback market with a continuation up. So I want to see them hold high up and the buyers not allowing them to really get anything done. I'm going to reduce just a little bit on this quick snap up, but I want to keep the majority of my long going because I like this area. Reducing takes a loss on the first portion. That keeps that loss relatively small, while bringing this into a more manageable area of interest. They didn't get the break above the highs, so I don't have a reason being long in that. And seeing them jerk back up, I might as well take the reduced risk while I can get it. But this long down here still maintains that mentality of no pullback trend straight to the highs. Starting to see the bears dipping back. This is either going to be a quick failure or it's going to be the start of that bear drive to the downside. This is where bulls will come in if they're going to be looking to buy this dip to transition that phase. If they begin closing too much further down than realistically the next pullback, I want to pay attention to because the next rise up into the 60s, 55s or so. I want to see how the market responds to that area. I am going to take this as a slight reduction of risk down here and keep the losses still small because the next pullback then would be to L1. Big jerk to the upside. In the incredibly short term, if we go from the top to the current developing at least, that POC is there. All right, larger pullback to L1. I don't really have any interest in adding any risk down in this middle zone here. If it just jumps back up, then I'll look for actual risk targets. But the next area of interest is going to be down to the 5-minute POC 32s up to like the 36s. Still doesn't feel like they've broken down enough to shake the confidence of bulls, though. Set this to... Now see, these tick ones are working. What the heck? My POCs weren't working, then they were working, and now they... okay. I don't know anymore. As far as actual risk, we got to get a little bit closer here to see what's going on. But as far as actual risk goes, that would be back up towards... Slightly ominous. Okay. Target's up at 666. Fantastic. Okay. Be like Arby's. We'll round it up. See if we can get that continuation up towards 666. I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist. We'll just put that on 0.5. All right. Rejection of the POC. I will reduce one more while it's around this break-even point. If it's going to jerk away from here, we should see a good strong string of bull bars, which will essentially make up for the entire move back up towards the highs into 666. But it's not worth hanging on to the risk because if it is going to pull back farther, we know that next pullback is L1, which is a solid like 20 points to the downside. 20 to 30 points at least. I don't want to be holding full or even half size on a 30-point pullback. No thanks. more continuation to the upside. Just about to type, finally I can see the candle around the cluster entry point there, and then you zoom out back again. Yep. All right, now notice they're tapping that 0.5 to 1 target to the tick. Algos, HFTs, JP Morgan's technical crowd, their computers took profit there. MIT orders, likely. We've got to try to trigger above that as proof. We are above the POC. It is demonstrating some good support, but seeing the algos taking profit there is going to make it short term a little bit more difficult. Upside potential easily another 20 ticks, though, if they can rifle through this area. Because then the next objective would be at minimum 1 to 1, which is up there. So we're finally into 945. Wow. Just a century and a half later, huh? Quick little snap at break even. I love this as a washout for a reload. Oh, I love that as a washout for a reload. That quick little dive back to that break even. Oh, man, that's really nice. Holy crap. Snap that thing right back up again. Jeez. Now, if they fail and they start churning back under, obviously that wasn't a little bit of a break-even trap underneath the base, but I love that initially for a washout. And seeing this continuation down, this adds a little bit more context to draw the average closer to the lows for that snap up. We're getting a lot of volume into the 945s. There's a lot going on into 945s anyway. I'll use this quick pop-up to take some off the table. Back up to the POC. I got top asks, and I obviously did not get filled. There we go. Out. Nice little jump back up to the upside. Essentially, the unfortunate thing, because of all this jerkiness back and forth, this entirety of this move ended up being about break even. I think I ended up losing like 10 ticks maybe on the whole thing. A little bit frustrating in the way that that's set up in there, but that's the difficulty of trying to catch those moves up at the top. Proper management, obviously. We did what was needed to get the trade going, but if we can get this going back to the upside, there will be more confirmation. We have not hit the L1. The POC is starting to shift back up. 53.75, watch this area. The bulls are trying to get this going. They need this candle to close on its top, basically. They couldn't do it. Little bit of a bear rejection off that POC. Get this off the table there. There we go. The bulls have a shot to try to get this thing going again. Oh, man, right off the POC. Can they close above? They got 70 ticks to do it. Ooh, POC shifting down and that candle closing on it. Interesting how they chose that approach, huh? Now we're jumping back up to the 53s. POC popping up a little bit further. Retesting. We got to see where they're able to get this thing. Ooh, big bull bar to the upside. Traders will be looking for a continuation on that movement. As soon as that candle closed, it got flushed with orders. You see that? Wow. See if they can get a little POC pullback or something. They're not going to allow it. I can't even get filled on the bid. They're not even going to allow the POC pullback. They know that's what people are waiting for. I tried buying the bid. I couldn't get a fill. That's a really big tell, by the way. When you try to buy the bid and you can't get filled when the market's jumping up and down supposedly all over the place. Oh, really? Now, I could take the option of just getting aggressive buy market, slap the buy button, and hope. I don't like trading on hope, but there is a good likelihood that this jumps up to the upside. They're probably not going to get a pullback, yeah, before it actually happens. So if you're aggressive enough, you could see reasons in there. They made it fairly obvious. I'm just not that aggressive on a Friday to chance that. I don't mind buying a pullback, even when it turns out to be a little bit of a vindictive pullback, but... Whoa. Big pullback. Now, the concern here is that this is meant to look like a washout, but we just cycled off of a very large objective that's up here. So, I mean, it might be a washout, but this could also be the start of like 2 or 3 really strong candles back to retest that POC down there. This thing is out in the stratosphere right now. What about the entire thing? POC's down at 1630. The 5-minute POC's at 3250, and that's the bottom of L1. Wow. Well, very obviously swing longs are going to be looking to build in down there. That's nuts. And really, it's going to be L1 or L3, so I'm not even going to pay attention to the other ones, just an L1 up here. Market pulling back very aggressively. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Did you see those orders come in when it tapped the POC? Buyers tried buying it, and they're getting crapped on right now. That thing hit that previous POC, and that lit up like a Christmas tree. At 63, you can still see it right there. 63, 61, 75, that previous POC, 53. Or no, that was back up at 63. No, they didn't do it in bulk. It was only on the fast one. You had to be watching it. That's why I have them as bright colors, because it's really obvious. Even if I don't know, I can obviously tell out of the corner of my eye what's green and what's pink. That was a big flush of buyers that came in on that retest of the POC. Again, we're nowhere near an L1. In this, if it's going to keep going, it's likely going to do that. With this type of movement, it shouldn't pull back to an L1. That's why I was trying to position myself aggressively up here, because it shouldn't get back to an L1. Looking for that rotation back up. Same thing here. Buyers are going to be looking to try to position themselves ahead of the L1 for the rotation back up. All right. And then given today, we're probably not going to do an extended session. I'm just going to keep going for a little while longer as we go into the afternoon, because honestly, I don't really want to even necessarily have a situation where I promote trading in the after hours of any kind. So I'm just going to keep the morning room going until we're done, and skip the extended session this time around. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in. 10 o'clock's around the corner, but I'm not planning on closing up shop for a little bit yet. But around 10:15 or so, we'll probably start. I'm sorry, around 10:15 or so, we'll start wrapping up in that area and just keep it going. I know how it's going to go. As soon as we transition away, we're going to miss like some really nice movement. And then it's going to be dead going into the rest of the day. And I just don't want to risk that. Sellers have a very nice bear transition going on here. Now, they are trying to get things going. If I modify this... Not on tick. Do it on minute, not on tick. It loads faster. It looks like crap, though. Ugh. I hate the look a minute. No, I can't. Nope. That looks awful. I cannot do that. I'm going to turn that back real fast. That POC is a little further down there. Still hasn't changed. 14,630s. In a little bit of a wedge, you can kind of see it forming inside here. If you zoom in a little bit closer, if we mark it up with the wedge, we don't really have a top yet, so it's hard to say. Probably going to look something like this, though. That's more of a pennant, really, huh? Bulls starting to creep this thing back up. Again, we are not in an L1, and we have that POC of the near term. I can't click on it without clicking on the bigger one. That smaller one inside of there that's getting a double bounce off that previous pullback. It didn't look like they were, but they bounced off of it with all those buy orders. They did it again with another double bottom, and we're kind of creating this little wedge that's inside here. Just a little tiny wedge. I think the blue's more obvious when it's this small. $10 o'clock does have some news. I mean, again, the relevance of it when non-farms were earlier, questionable. I don't necessarily want to be a buyer off the top of L1. It makes a lot more sense to buy off of the bottom. That doesn't mean that buyers won't try to come in. What's with the Russell getting whacked? Well, remember, yesterday we were talking about how the Russell was the only one out of the entire batch of index markets that actually had any POC shift. So if you go backward and you look at that drive to the upside, just the drive to the upside, this is the only market that had that shift underneath. All of the other ones are above their POC. So, I mean, it's kind of free and clear. It's allowed to because there's nothing that stands in its way. That's the issue with the Russell when you're looking at it from that perspective. And you stack on top of that the fact that this is a very nice kind of secondary drive to the upside and almost perfect ABCD correction right back into that level. Yikes. Now, if they start breaking above it, that could be a serious implication for a huge rally to come. And then all of a sudden, Russell becomes like the big mover, you know. But for right now, oh, whoa. POC just changed on the larger picture on the NASDAQ. We shifted up and now it's staying above. Ooh, lordy. Big strong bull bar on bar 4 for the S&P, trying to continue back up to the upside. I've totally neglected the S&P today. The NASDAQ has offered up more than its fair share. Yesterday you mentioned you might have to offset. What does that mean? Depending on the context, offset in what context? I probably said offset like 6 or 7 times. I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Like, was there a specific time that I was, or what was I talking about? I guess would be the... We're dipping back to this POC at 53.25. right on top of 10 o'clock. There is news at 10, starting to break out through the lows. Oh, when the position was getting... Okay, yeah. So what I was talking about there... let me go back a little bit. So the idea behind it, and you can see I gave it another shot. I gave up on it later, which turned out to be a mistake. What I meant by that was when I'm offsetting, at the time, I was building into this leg because I was expecting this, right? I wanted that to jerk all the way back to the upside. Unfortunately for me, I was not right. Now, like we were talking about, I was building into this from a positional stance of a larger picture, 15-minute chart, major reversal back to the upside. So when I'm talking about offset, remember at the time, my average is like right here. Well, in the bigger picture, if we've dipped down to here, I would much rather have my average lower. Right? I would rather offset my entry point so it's lower in a more favorable position so that when it does rotate back up, if I am correct, and we do rotate up within the realm of what I'm comfortable with risking at least, then I'm in a position where my average isn't way up at the top and I've got to go for a scalper's target. I can go for a much larger target and, I can do whatever I want with the rest. So when I'm talking about offset like that, what I meant by that was adding another 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, or everybody's risk is different here. For me, I like doing it in 1-to-1 batches. I'm not a huge fan of going double, triple, quadruple down unless I really feel like I'm getting squeezed. And it's got to be a heck of a spot to reverse out of. But by doing this, what this does is this squeezes my entry point kind of in the middle. So you can kind of see what I was trying to go for if it were to bounce off of that higher low with another continuation, which we see higher lows all over the place. That's not unreasonable to expect. Then the anticipation would be, again, back to the upside. That didn't happen, and it went further. So here again, we're in a major zone of interest. I want to have my average somewhere down here because on the 15-minute chart, that was smack at the bottom of that channel. That's the best scenario for an average. So again, I don't want to get out of my long, but what I have to do is I've got to offset a little bit. I've got to increase my risk in the larger zone of interest with the trap low. As long as we don't break underneath this base, we're fine. They transition underneath that lows. So when it pops up, I added another 1-to-1. That means that effectively I went 1-to-1, 1-to-1, 1-to-1. That's 3 altogether. And that puts the average roughly a little bit you can see where the average was. I exited the majority of the position around break even because I know that my initial intention of the trade was just wrong. I tried to get it to go in my direction so many times and it just came back and slapped me in the face. Eventually, the next day, it did what I wanted it to do. But, and you can see I gave it one more shot. But it didn't do it in the way that I wanted it to do. So I had to reduce my risk. By offsetting down, that means that by exiting the majority of everything, which in this case I think was all but one, put my position in a situation where I had my one entry down here, which, as far as favorable entry location, hard to ask for better than that. That's why I was offsetting. First in, first out would dictate that the majority of it was out at break even. I exited the one more. That's what it was. I had 2 left. I exited one more so that I was back in profitable territory a little bit more. And that left my one down here to run. And when it starts going up into that upside objective, I can measure, where's my 2-to-1 at this point? I'm risking from here to here. My 2-to-1 was here. I took it a little bit above that, but that was kind of the objective. So we hit that 2-to-1 and it cycled down. My 2-to-1 initially was up here, but the market told me, hey, dum-dum, you're trying to pick it up in the wrong spot. You got to look somewhere else. So I had to adjust with what the market told me. And that was my exit for the 2-to-1 in the last position. Unfortunately, it wasn't with all the contracts that I wanted, but, welcome to life. I had to adjust. And when it pulled back to that break-even point, you can see I gave it one more shot, and then it dropped underneath the lows. Looked like it was going to try to reverse back down. I just said, scrap it. This thing's a piece of garbage, and I exited. That ended up being the spot where I should have held on to it. Of course, right? Ugh. Happens to everybody. All right. Oh, it looks like my wife is surprising me with lunch. So let's get the final call for questions in. So I guess we are ending around 10 o'clock. I was going to try to keep things going a little bit longer, but a surprise lunch. That's nice. on a Friday. Yeah. Nice little pullback here, but the problem is we're below the POC on all fronts. This is the attempt from the sellers. I do not want to be a buyer right now. There is a chance that it does buy off of the ones, but I have to assume that every attempt that I take is either going to require a gargantuan amount of risk to increase my probability to a halfway decent point, or we're going to be in a situation where this is going to drive down to that L3, that bigger pullback. And given that we're under the POC, ugh. What's for lunch? I'm not sure. I haven't been told. I was just told that that we're going out for lunch and that she's by the gas station to get ready. So it's like, okay. Hopefully sushi or something, yeah? So anyway, that's what I meant by offsetting, just to go back to your question. That's what I was talking about. Oh, and she's already here. Holy crap. I am way behind the ball. So I've got to jump ship real fast. I wasn't expecting her to get here that quickly, but she's here already. So I'm going to jump. Sorry for a little bit of an abrupt stop, but if you have any questions that I may have missed, feel free to shoot me an email, jhb@ssftg.com. We'll get those all covered for you from there. Otherwise, enjoy the weekend. Like I said, Monday is my daughter's birthday, so I'm probably going to be a lot more in and out. There isn't going to be a room, so just kind of keep that in mind. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of the day. I'll get those questions back a little bit later after I get back in the office, and then we'll go from there, all right? Have a great one. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you all back on Tuesday and probably back in the chat room for the rest of you members. So we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks.